One of the major challenges that skeptics put forward about the gospel writers is that they couldn't get their story straight. Whereas you believe that's not a problem because witnesses should never agree completely. How does that help in the case for the Gospels?
Yeah, this is one of those areas that I didn't really stumble me. As I was looking at the Gospels for the first time, really just trying to mine out the words of Jesus, I was not interested in becoming a believer. I wasn't interested in God's existence. I simply thought this Jesus guy might have some smart things to say. So I'm just kind of trying to mine out the red letters. And I saw right away that, I mean, as a cop, you're constantly seeing the contradictions or the apparent contradictions that exist between eyewitness accounts. And I saw the alleged contradictions that people typically point to in the Gospels. They're there. But I never was ever for a second stumbled by it because to me they were fully within what I expect in terms of apparent contradictions between eyewitnesses of the same event. I can tell you, I had a case once where a murder occurred in our city. I was about maybe an hour, a little less than an hour behind it. I had to get dressed in my suit and get out to the scene. It was a rainy night, and patrol officers, we usually tell them not to do this, but this particular night it was raining, so they put all the witnesses in the back seat of a patrol car, and they sat together for about 50 minutes before I got there. 50 minutes, without any supervision, talking to each other before I got there. What a mess, because now I had three identical accounts from, the same account three times, instead of what I want to see, which is the messy, seemingly contradictory, cluttered, and what the heck's going on here kind of account. That's what you get with eyewitnesses. There are times when an eyewitness will tell you something, and you'll say, there's no way that could even have happened that way. It makes no sense. And then the next guy comes along and tells you something that puts the puzzle together for you and makes sense of the first person's account. As a matter of fact, we see that happening in the Gospels. We don't have contradictions. We have puzzle pieces that have interlocking pieces. So, for example, Matthew will say that Jesus walked along the Sea of Galilee and called the disciples, and they dropped their fish and everything they were doing and followed him. And I remember listening to that, reading that, and thinking, it's got to be some kind of literary device. There's no way they just dropped everything as soon as he walks up and they start to follow him. It's not until you see another account. And by the way, it's interesting about the first account. In the first account, James and John are mending their nets. So there's no discussion as to why they're mending their nets. Something has broken them. And all of a sudden, they drop everything and follow Jesus. Well, the other account tells you that he walks along and talks to Peter and says, let's go out fishing. And Peter says, we've been fishing all day. There's no fish out there. No, get in the boat. We're going to go fishing. And they catch such a huge load of fish that it breaks the nets. So now this account tells you why they left and also why they were mending their nets. But the first account doesn't tell you any of this. And so when you see that people give you aspects of the account that come together and explain each other, a pastor named J.J. Blunt in the 19th century called this undesigned coincidences of the gospel. I call this unintentional eyewitness support. This guy is telling me something, this guy is telling me something, and only together do I get the robust picture of what actually happened. So I'm not at all dissuaded by the fact that there are seeming contradictions. It's our job as the detective to figure out, well, is it a geographic perspective? Is it an emotional perspective? Is it some history of the witness itself that causes them to see one thing at the expense of another? And we have to look at those and try to explain why we have differences. And that has never stopped us, though, from using these witnesses reliably in court.